what we're going to be looking at today, Daniel chapter 7. And before we begin, I ask Kurt to lead us in a word of prayer.
Let's bow. Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this beautiful day you've given us and for the safe night of rest that we've enjoyed. We're thankful that you've given us your word, Father, that we can come to know you. And we pray that as we study your word here this morning, that we would set aside our cares and our troubles, that we would focus on your word and the lessons that are brought to us, and that we would meditate on your word each day so that we might become better workers for you and your kingdom. Help us always, Father, to be a good example to those around us, to strive not only to please you, but to love those around us, to share your word with those around us, Father. We pray these things in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, so just by way of reminder, so I do have some study sheets for you all. They're in the lobby. Feel free to pick one up. You don't need one necessarily right now. It's not. I didn't give you a bunch of questions to answer. It's really just a suggested way of looking at the rest of Daniel that maybe will help give you some clarity on that in preparation for our times to talk about it together. So in preparing, does anybody read the rest of Daniel in preparing for class today? I know you all read chapter 7, but did anyone just go ahead and were so enthralled they just read the rest of the book? Okay, great. Nobody did that. Okay, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Okay. So what you may or may not have noticed, I hope you did, is that we just finished looking at the first 6 chapters of Daniel, and the first 6 chapters of the book are historical chapters. Okay, so you might describe them as like Daniel's biography. All right, they're about him, they're about his friends and the kings and all these different things that happen. But when we flip the page over into chapter 7, the rest of Daniel is not going to be that way. Okay, it's going to read very differently. And you can see that it's almost like, it's not exactly, but if you look at chapter 7 and the first 2 verses, it reads, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. And he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea." And so, it's not exactly right linguistically, but it's almost like now we're entering into, you can almost describe it as Daniel's diary. Right? We're going to get a glimpse into things that Daniel himself sees. All right, and that's what's going to be presented to us here in the back half of Daniel. Now, so there's a lot of things here that should kind of just pop up to us very readily, right? In the first 6 chapters, what role have we seen Daniel play primarily, especially relative to all these kings of the empires he's lived in? What has his job been, or what are the major things he has done?
To the king, you would communicate God's will to them.
Yeah. Okay.
So advisor to the king, like an interpreter of some sort, right? So the king has a vision.
Someone's got to tell us what the vision means. That's Daniel. There's this weird writing on the wall. Someone's got to tell us what that means. It's Daniel. So he has very consistently been this person who has translated, if you will, the will of God to different individuals, primarily kings. Now when we go into chapter 7 and following, that's changed, all right? I mean, we just read those first 2 verses. It starts off with Daniel's vision. This is a vision given to him. It's not given to the king, and he's got to figure it out or interpret it or whatever. It's given to him directly. And that's really the way that these last few chapters of Daniel are going to be presented. It's going to be, a direct, I'll use the word revelation from him about the things that he's been shown, the things that have been shared with him. When we got to the end of chapter 6, how old was Daniel? Ballpark. Okay, yep. I mean, 60, 70, 80 is like, those are all reasonable guesses, right? It's about 59 years at least that he's been in captivity. And so depending on how old you think or young do you think he was when he was first captured? Just kind of tack that on. So he's an older man, right? And that's kind of been a little bit of our theme is we've seen how Daniel's entire life, he has consistently been someone who's turned to God and served God and never taken opportunities to garner accolades to himself, right? He is always very consistently giving God the glory, whatever role he is meant to fill there while he's in exile. Okay, what is what's the problem with chapter 7 and verse 1? Why is it suddenly not consistent with the rest of the book so far? Yeah, chronology, right? So remember that when we were in chapter 6, right? And I guess you can look at the end there. It says at the very end of chapter 6, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And then chapter 7, it says in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Well, that's out of order, right? That's not the way the kings go. And so when is the last time we read about Belshazzar, king of Babylon? Back in chapter 5. And in fact, in chapter 5 was the last year, the last day of the reign of Belshazzar. So if you were going to reorder everything, chapter 7 would technically go before chapter 5 in the chronology. Okay, so that's a good indicator and a marker that now we are meant to consider this differently. Okay, so the first 6 chapters were in order. It's very much like, let me explain what's happening here. Let me record the events. Let's lay them out here in a very orderly, organized fashion. Suddenly, chapter 7, nope. The timeline is being broken. The vision is given to Daniel. We then also, as readers, are meant to say, okay, maybe I should consider this differently now because it is written and presented to me differently. That's exactly what we're supposed to do. Okay? One of the kind of the tips I put on these study sheets is that we're going to do a lot of asking why in these back chapters here. And I want to be very cautious with that question. Job asked why a lot, and he never got an answer to it. So you got to handle the question why a little judiciously. I feel like for the subject matter here, us asking why very often, very consistently, is really by design. That's going to help us better, better understand the message that's being shown here. Okay? And just to make sure nobody is kind of I don't want anyone to get cold feet about this study. Okay, this is easy, right? If you don't think Daniel chapter 7 to 12 is easy, I'm just going to tell you it's easy. We are fortunate because Daniel doesn't have any more insight than we do. Okay, and we're going to see this as we go through. There are going to be parts where Daniel says, "Wait, can you explain this to me? I want to know more." And that's probably about the same thing we would do as we read here too, right? We would stop at different parts and say, "I really need some more instruction or need some more information here." Daniel's doing the same thing. Okay, so just picture that we're on this ride with Daniel as our partner, and he's going to ask the right questions in context here to help us understand and know more about what's going on. Okay, I'm almost positive we're not going to finish chapter 7 today. There's just too much. And really what we're going to do today is it's going to be a little bit more tactical than I would like because we've got to explain all the weirdness in chapter 7 to some degree, right? So we aren't totally lost with things. But keep in mind that these chapters were not given because God likes chaos. The opposite, right? God likes to share information, and he's trying to communicate things. Trying to communicate to Daniel, probably by extension trying to communicate to the Jews, perhaps some of the Jews still in exile, perhaps the Jews after they come back from exile. And there's got to be something here probably for us too, because here it is, and we have access to it. And I'm going to suggest to you, I think that's the hardest part, is reading the back half of Daniel and really trying to understand or discern what are we supposed to do with this? Like, so what? Okay, it's weird, and maybe we could draw some cool pictures out of it, but what does it mean for me as someone trying to follow God? I think that's a harder question that we'll try to address here as we go through these studies. Okay, so let's talk about Daniel chapter 7 Let's read, I know I read the first 2 verses. Let's read the first 3 verses once more, and that'll kind of kick us off here. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. Okay, so this is the beginning of Daniel's vision. And what is the very first thing that he sees in the vision? Okay, 4 winds, and what else? What are the 4 winds doing? Stirring up the sea. Okay, so if you have, we need to read Daniel 7. I want you to think about the worst nightmare you ever had, and that's what Daniel 7 is. Okay, so as we start here, Daniel is presented with this image of the ocean, right, the sea, and it is just agitated. Like there's this huge wind, everything is being stirred up, it is tumultuous, it is chaotic. The dream is about tumult and chaos and agitation. Okay, the dream is not going to be about puppies and rainbows. It's going to be about things are really rough. Okay, what does this mean? What's going to follow this? Okay, and then what is the next thing that Daniel sees? The big part of the vision. What follows out of the sea? What comes up? 4 beasts, right? And again, these are not. We're going to talk about this in just a minute. These are not like, oh, there's a dog and a cat. And they are terrifying. Okay, again, like it is a nightmare. All right, these are scary, scary things that he's seen, and there's a purpose behind that. Okay, so consider that all of this is part of the intent of the vision. Okay, how many beasts are there? 4. I'm giving you easy questions here to get us going. Okay, is there anywhere else in Daniel where we have already read about a vision about 4 things? All right. Yeah. First vision that we saw, where was that? What chapter? 2. Thank you. Okay. Chapter 2. So this is part of us kind of going back to this idea that Daniel is meant to be easy. Okay. So even if we didn't have a lot of other information, we could connect the dots pretty easily at this point still. All right. 4 things. Wait a minute. We've heard about 4 things previously back in chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about 4 things, right? And what were the things? What were the things actually? He has a dream of the statue in pieces. What does each piece represent? Kingdoms, right? Okay, empires, kings. So we could probably get off on a pretty good foot already, right? Thinking, okay, 4 beasts sounds like chapter 2. It's probably going to be more of the same about these kingdoms and these kings. And in fact, you would be right. Okay. Just so we know, though, right? Again, we're not at sea. If you flip over or look down in your pages, verse 16 and 17. I kind of referred to this a few minutes ago. Daniel says, right? I approached in verse 16 one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. And then in verse 17 he says, oh, these 4 great beasts are 4 kings who will arise out of the earth. Okay, so we can make connections early on. Daniel is going to be told, point blank, let me just explain to you a little bit more about what these things represent. Because he is ignorant just like we are, all right? Now, maybe the first thing that I really want you to focus on and put a pin in and don't forget, and I'm asking you to read between the lines a little bit here, is the 4 creatures, which are terrifying. They represent 4 terrifying kingdoms that are coming. Where did they come from in the vision? And the sea is not exactly the answer I want. Right? What prompted them to come up out of the sea? Let's put it that way. Yeah.
I don't know. Wasn't the sea like representative of man or even chaos or Satan?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Whichever one you want. Yeah. Right. No, it can represent a few different things. But I'll ask it this way: what was agitating the sea in the first place? The winds of heaven. Okay? So everything that's going to be revealed here is a mandate from heaven, a mandate from God. Things are happening and taking place because God wills it. Okay? The winds of heaven are stirring up the sea is agitated, the creatures come out. This is all according to God's plan. Right? This is what He wants to happen. So please keep that in mind. This isn't like, this is not meant to communicate that God is just like throwing grenades down at Daniel and the Jews. You know, whatever happens, you guys. I mean, He is controlling the scenario here. Okay? So, maybe the first why question that we're going to ask here is, if God is in fact in control of all this, why is God doing that? Why would God decide, let's just create a bunch of chaos and mess, and let me show Daniel these crazy images to show him how terrifying things are going to be? Why would God present a message like this to Daniel, and by extension to God's own people even? Right? So we're going to look at a few verses here real quick to help level set us. Let's look first at Zechariah 13. So we're just going to kind of cherry pick these verses out of context, but I want us to see some consistency here in some of these passages. Zechariah 13, verse 9 says this: I will put this third into the fire and refine them, as one refines silver, and test them as gold is tested. They will call upon my name, and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people. And they will say, the Lord is my God. Okay? Malachi chapter 3, verse 2. But who can endure the day of his coming, and who can stand when he appears? I'll read from back here. For he will be like a refiner's fire or a launderer's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the Levites and refine them like gold and silver. Then the Lord will have men who will bring offerings in righteousness, and the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem will be acceptable to the Lord, as in days gone by, as in former years. And then one more verse from 1 Peter. We'll go into the New Testament for this one, chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. All right, so we might just aggregate those particular verses. We'll ask the question again: why is God getting ready to bring about these times of chaos and terror? For what purpose? That's it, to refine His people. Okay, this is very consistent. Okay, God is always looking to refine His people. Right? There really isn't a part in the history of the Bible where God kind of sits back ever and says, yeah, it's okay. We're good, I guess. That's fine. He's always bringing about something that is going to separate the wheat and the chaff, right? Because that's what God wants. He's like, I want the people who are true to me. And we're going to, if I have to allow some trials or allow some chaos to refine them and purify them, that's what I will do. All right? So keep in mind again, where is Daniel when he receives this vision? Where is he at? He's in captivity, right? For 59, 60 years already. The Jews are still in captivity. They haven't necessarily been set free yet. So think about that if you're Daniel, or if you're perhaps one of the captive Jews who has heard about this. Okay, we've been in captivity now for, right, 10, 20, 40, 60, however, 70 years almost, right? And boy, we've been here a long time. And does anybody remember when we studied Ezekiel? What were a lot of the messages that some of those false prophets were delivering to the Jews? What were they saying about the time of captivity? Remember that?
It's going to be
Short, right? They were hearing that. Like, no, don't get settled in here. You can just keep everything packed. There's no way God is going to really punish us. I mean, we're His chosen people. We will be out of here, right? After we slap on the wrist, learn our lesson, and God will take us back. And God's real prophets are the ones who have to step up and say, no, you should just settle in. Find a wife, get married, raise kids, make a life here. God is going to punish it. And so think about that the audience is still captive. And I'm sure the message that you would want to hear after being captive for decades is, okay, I'm just waiting for God to come back. Man, let's end this captivity. Let's make things good again. Let's go back to the promised land. Let's be God's people. I can't wait for it to hear that that's going to happen once again. And the message Daniel gets is, actually, things are not going to get good again for a long time, right? Things are going to be very chaotic in the extended future even. This is a very difficult message to hear, and I think that's why we're going to see Daniel react the way that he does to this message and the following chapters too, because this is maybe a little bit of supposition. I'm not sure Daniel knows what to do with this exactly. You know, he's been in cap. We talked about that early on in this class, that his life in captivity has not been smooth, right? He's had to work through upheavals, military conquests, one new king after another new king, people trying to go after him politically. You know, how would you feel after having weathered all those storms for your whole life, and God gives you a message, and this is the message? It's like the worst nightmare you've ever had. That would be hard. Okay, and I think that's maybe why Daniel is not sure maybe what to do with the message. Yes, sir.
About the songs that we sing, the winds and the waves shall obey His will, an anchor in the time of storm, or the anchor.
I knew it until you asked me.
Passes by, an anchor in the time of storm. We sing many songs. This is our life.
Yes.
This is our life.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel that's such a good point. We are going to see. I feel like I'm showing my cards ahead of time, right? But what God is trying to do here is really, He's trying to take this vision, which, let's be honest, when we read chapter 2, do we feel like scared about it? I mean, Nebuchadnezzar himself, his language is, you know, he was perplexed. He couldn't sleep, but he was like curious more than anything else. Like, I want to know what that vision means, right? Daniel is scared of the vision. And really what God is trying to do is take this message from chapter 2 and amp it up and say, I want to make sure, Daniel, that you understand that what is coming is not going to be pleasant, right? And to Phil's point, that sounds horrific, and it sounds really terrifying. Probably not much different for us, right? There are a lot of things that we can look around and see the chaos that surrounds us, right? It has existed nonstop for a long time, okay, for us as Christians. Okay, so God is likely given this because he's still going to pursue this message and this intention to refine His people. That is not going to stop. Okay, God is always going to look for ways to purify and to refine, not to oppress them for the sake of oppressing them, but what Peter said, because the result He wants is praise, glory, and honor. Okay, He wants people who are going to come out of those trials and say, let's go back to God, and let's lift Him up, and let's follow Him. And remember, that's why the Jews were in captivity in the first place, because they had cast all that aside. And they had become idolaters, and followed all manner of wickedness. God is looking for them to come back and be the people He set them apart to be. All right? Okay, so that is going to, I think, set us up a little bit to start talking a little more tactically about what's going on here in chapter 7. And so we're going to see the creatures, first 3, come up from the sea that is agitated, and Daniel says they were all different from one another. And so the first creature, what does the first creature look like? What?
A lion.
Looks like a lion. Okay, so we can make the associations here, right? We already knew from chapter 2 that the head of gold of the statue was symbolic of Babylon. Here, the lion is again the first one. He is also symbolic of Babylon. Why a lion? This is not a hard question. Why a lion? You think lion. That's it. Okay, you got to go think Lion King, right? He is noble. He is mighty. He's scary in his own right, but he is like the king of the beasts, right? There's a regalness to him. So the first creature is like a lion, but also not. What is weird about the lion? Okay, he has wings, and what kind of wings does he have? Eagle's wings. Same question. Why an eagle? The same answer.
King of the sky.
Do what?
Sort of king of the sky.
That's it. I think what he's doing here, we're just meant to understand this first creature is very regal. It's very noble. He is the king of beasts. He is the king of the sky. I mean, wow. What a noble creature. This is Nebuchadnezzar with the head of gold. How else has Nebuchadnezzar been described in the book of Daniel so far? What else was he described as?
Before he was humbled, especially, how was he?
What
Imagery was used to describe him?
Tree.
That's right.
And
Right,
right,
it talks about
you are the tree that fills the whole earth, and everyone takes shelter under you. Magnificent. You feed everyone. I mean, he is just elevated and elevated and elevated to the level of nobility. Certainly, it's about Babylon. What happens to the first beast?
Okay, so his wings are plucked off. That's one.
And then
what?
Stands on
Stands on 2 feet.
And then
Then
what?
what?
Okay,
Line of man was given to.
okay, so that's weird. What we are, I believe, meant to simply understand from that is that this creature becomes a man, right? Which is in the scope of creatures and beasts is superior. Okay, he is given the mind to think and reason like a man is. He's made to walk like a man. He's not a beast anymore. Anybody got any ideas about perhaps what that is a reference to, potentially? That we have already read about in the book of Daniel?
He was humbled.
I think so.
I think it's going back to where Nebuchadnezzar was previously humbled because of his pride and arrogance before God, and yet at the end of that time, he was restored. And so I think it's pretty easy to see how some of his nobility was removed or plucked off for a time, but then he was brought back to a period of wisdom and understanding. And in fact, you see that after he's restored, he makes that proclamation, right, about God and how great God is. And so I think that this is very descriptive of Babylon, particularly Nebuchadnezzar, simply saying that he had a measure of wisdom that these other kingdoms are not going to get. And probably because of Daniel's direct influence, he is able to interject there throughout his reign. Hey, do you remember that God's in charge of you? And hey, do you remember that you're in charge because God put you there? And kind of make these suggestions and these remind Nebuchadnezzar especially of these truths. And in fact, it's probably so prevalent. Do you remember what was the rebuke that Daniel gave to Belshazzar back in chapter 5 when he came and read the writing on the wall? What did he rebuke Belshazzar about specifically?
Like you should have known.
Yeah, you should know.
Right? We told Nebuchadnezzar, you knew the story. This should not be a surprise to you. That if you're going to party all the time and desecrate the holy vessels of God and desecrate His name, God will not stand for that. Okay? And thus the kingdom was removed from Belshazzar that very night. Okay? Good. All right, the second beast is like what? A bear. Okay? And so the second beast is like a bear. And which kingdom is this? Okay, so if you want to say Medo-Persia, you want to say Persia, that's fine. They're both right. Okay? Why a bear?
Right?
Imagery is for a reason. Okay, when you think of a bear, what do you think of? Not Pooh Bear, not Panda Bear, but like grizzly bear or polar bear. What do you think of?
It's pretty ferocious.
Okay. Right,
The bear is ferocious.
This bear amplifies one of the bear characteristics that the bear always eats. Okay, the bear consumes constantly. Is always eating, never full, In fact, this bear, right, when it comes out of the sea, it is like in the process of eating. Like it's got the ribs in its mouth. It's like he just finished dinner. What we are meant to see here is, okay, that kingdom is going to be hungry, and it's going to eat and consume. And this kingdom is associated very directly with Cyrus. I don't remember, maybe it was our first class. I think I rattled off to you all the titles that Cyrus had. I mean, he's got like a dozen or 15 different titles. Every time he conquers something, he's like, great, now I'm the king of Egypt, or now I'm the king of Media, and I'm the king of kings. I mean, he just consumes everything. The huge empire that we see in the Persian Empire. What's different about this bear? What does it say is unusual about him?
Raised up on just one side.
Thank you. Raised up on one side. So just kind of picture he's got his legs on one half, or I don't know, 4 inches taller or longer than the legs on the other half. And probably this is because originally this is the Medo-Persian Empire, and eventually the Persian Empire will just kind of engulf the Median Empire and just be Persian. Okay, so that's all. We're just seeing that it is an unequal pairing of two bigger empires. Eventually one will be swallowed up. The 3 ribs in its mouth, most people think that these are probably representative of the kingdoms of Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. So there's kind of the next 3 biggest empires that Cyrus conquers. Okay, so Medo-Persian Empire, Persian Empire is more dominant. They're conquering other empires. There's 3 big ones there. It's all about the bear. Okay.
The they is in verse 5. When it says they said unto it, arise. And who's the they?
No, that's a great question. Jackie, I think that actually kind of goes back to the idea that everything's being engineered by God. And you can almost see it's like the bear comes up, and I know it doesn't say God there, but it's almost like God, you can picture him saying, you know what I need you to do? Devour. Right? That's what I've called you up out of the sea to do, is just eat everything and take it all over. So I think it's just hearkening back to the fact that everything is happening here, not because God has no control over it, but because God has absolute control over it. And it's all with a divine purpose behind it. I think that's a great question to ask there. Good why question to ask, I think. Okay. All right, beast number 3 is like what? A leopard. And what is very unleopard-like about this beast? 4 wings. Okay, which kingdom is this? Greece. Okay, Alexander the Great. This beast is built for speed. Okay, that's it. The leopard is fast. If it had 2 wings, that would be fast. It has 4 wings, it's super fast. It's fast, fast, fast. Okay, get it? What's going to happen to the leopard? Or what else? What else is very strange about the leopard? Let's start there too. There's one more really weird thing. Forehead. Okay, so this is all Alexander. You don't know the history. When Alexander dies, his 4 generals split up the kingdom. 2 of them eventually grow to become the precursors of Rome. One of them conquers the other, and that's basically how you get to Rome. Okay, from that point on. So 4 heads, 4 of something is typically associated with images of Greece in the Bible. Also true here. All right. That brings us to beast number 4. And what is the 4th creature like?
The first description is dreadful and terrible.
Okay.
Strong.
All right. Okay.
Terrifying.
Dreadful what?
It seems like it's so far different from anything he's seen that he doesn't have a way to say it's like a lion, it's like a leopard, it's something else. It's beyond his comprehension.
Okay. That's exactly right. That's the point. Okay, that is the point. So these beasts, the first 3, okay, are kind of weird and they're a little scary. The 4th beast, Daniel doesn't have a like for it. Okay, it is so terrifying and strange and just, mean. He can't describe it in terms of any other animal you and I know. Okay, it is that frightening to him, and this is the Roman Empire. All right, so just consider that, all right, at this point. We'll come back to this very briefly, but consider this at that point, that these first three kingdoms, there is at least some semblance of connection, okay? And so the imagery that God is presenting is helping us to see what are those kingdoms going to be like, right? What are they going to do? And generally speaking, they have some similarities, right? He says they're all like some animal or another. There are ways to describe them. They do what kingdoms do, okay? But that fourth one is going to do things that kingdoms have not done. Okay, that fourth one, that fourth kingdom, whenever it shows up, is going to be markedly different from the kingdoms that have come before. Okay, so again, if you are Daniel and you're receiving the information, this is almost like layer of terror upon layer of terror. Okay, we're in exile. I would really like to get a good positive message. Nope. Okay, let's let the nightmare begin. One beast is scary, two beasts is scary, three. Okay, these are scary. That's not good news either. But then the fourth beast makes everything even worse. And so things do not get better the longer they're going to continue in terms of the time, the chronology, and the vision. They're only going to get worse for however long this vision lasts. Okay, so for Daniel, for God's people, there is not a light yet at the end of the tunnel. Let's just put it that way. Okay, this is like the point where you wake up from your nightmare and you're like, that was horrible. I never want to go to sleep again because of that. Okay? That's where we are at this particular point in this vision, in the message that God is trying to give here. Okay? All right, fourth beast. What are some of the things that stand out about the fourth beast? There's a whole bunch of things. What are some of the weird things about the fourth beast? Iron teeth. Okay, that's one. What else?
Yeah, I mean, this is like, again, the most horrific dragon. I don't know. I mean, I'm imagining dragon life, but again, it doesn't really say that.
Right. Yeah. Like beast number 3, remember, he was built for speed. This beast is just built to be scary. I don't know another way to describe it, right? So there's iron teeth, got all the horns. Anything else that stands out?
It's utter destruction. It devours, and then whatever's left, it tramples.
Yes.
There's nothing going to be left.
Right. It's like a bulldozer, right? Okay. There's not going to be scraps left, right? It's going to eat like the bear, and then whatever it misses eating, it's just going to stomp on anyway and destroy. Okay. Very good. All right. Anything else about the beast? This is odd. Yeah. Okay. The horns are just crazy, right? Their eyes and the horns talk, and I mean that's more than a little strange, right? When we talk about that. So let's ask why for a moment. Why 10 horns? And actually, the answer, at least partially, is in the text. Why does it have 10 horns? Daniel will kind of be informed about this a little later on in the chapter. Let me ask you, why so many? I don't care about the 10 right now. Why so many horns?
Doesn't it represent the 10 kingdoms that Rome gets eventually divided into?
It could. All right. One point to look at. And not necessarily wrong. Okay. Anyone else?
Coincide with rulers or rule or power, and so when you see horns, you think either a kingdom or a ruler. So different rulers might be part of the equation.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things here. So typically in biblical visions, like we saw this in Revelation, horns mean power. It has some measure of power, okay, when there's horns present. Well, this one's got 10 horns, so it's got a lot of power, okay? One of the things that is important for us to keep in mind between the vision of chapter 2 and the vision of chapter 7 is that the idea of kings and kingdoms is interchangeable. Okay, and here shall I illustrate that. When you go back to chapter 2, and Daniel interprets the vision of the statue to Nebuchadnezzar, he says two things. First, he says, Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold. And then he says, after you will be another kingdom. He doesn't say another king. Another kingdom after you, and another kingdom after you. And so, what we don't want to do necessarily is try and go through the vision and say, oh, okay, that means that king, and this means that king, and let's find our history books and let's overlay it and see exactly where everything meshes up. It's not really the point of the vision, okay? Now, you can kind of see what I've done. There are certainly kings historically that are more associated with each empire than others. Like everyone knows the Greek Empire is Alexander the Great. There's no question. Okay, Cyrus is the founder of the Persian Empire, but there are other major notable kings along the way. But we are meant to be a little fluid with that. So don't necessarily look in here and always read, we're looking for a specific king to fit that image or that horn or that role or that feature. We might just also be thinking about the kingdom itself kind of in general. All right. Now, part of what I want us to take from this about the quantity of horns, if you will, is that how long, we already said this, easy question, how long has Daniel been in captivity in Babylon?
About 60 years.
Okay, about 60 years, right? So Babylon is a lengthier empire than 60 years. But as far as where Daniel, the book of Daniel starts, we're talking about more or less an 80-year period, okay, for Babylon. When we talk about the Persian Empire, that will show up with Cyrus and a few other notables in there like Artaxerxes and Xerxes, that empire is about 200 years long, okay? The Greek Empire with Alexander is like 15 years, super short, right? But remember, super fast. When you get to the Roman Empire, okay, if you Google it, you're going to get a million results. How long did the Roman Empire last, right? The Roman Empire is, if you think about it this way, Alexander died in 323 BC. Okay? And the Roman Empire is still around when we get to the 400 AD. So, one way to look at that is the Roman Empire is almost 1,000 years long. Okay, 800-900 years is a very reasonable way to characterize it. So when we start talking about this beast and it has all these horns and this power, it is also speaking to the length of the empire lasting, right? So, Nebuchadnezzar's empire was basically Nebuchadnezzar. That was pretty run, right? The Persian Empire is going to be pretty mighty, a couple hundred years. Alexander's is really short. But this fourth beast, which is still the most terrifying, so on top of it being the scariest, it's going to be the longest lived. It will be around for a long time. Okay, so again, if you're Daniel, looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, it is not here yet. Okay, not only have we talked about the terror of the vision, the end of it is worse than the beginning, right? Because now we're getting to this beast that has multiple powers to it. Right? Multiple things going on with it. And even the image of the creature itself is kind of hinting at it's going to live a long, long time, much longer than the beast that preceded it. Louise?
24, it tells us the 10 horns are the 10 kings.
Yep.
But they do all come out of the same kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you see the war between them.
Yeah.
Or the struggle between them.
Right. Yeah. And so just think about that. If you're talking about, well, how long does it take for 10 kings to rule? I don't know, but like Nebuchadnezzar reigned for 40-ish years. I mean, that was pretty long. I mean, you can get into some major time there, right? If you think about how long does it take to go through 10 different kings. So this beast, this empire, is going to be very long-lasting, unfortunately, very cruel and very destructive too. Okay. All right, so I kept my promise. I told you it was going to be very tactical today. And that's what we did. We are going to come back to chapter 7 because we've really only talked about half the vision, the bad part. And so we want to talk about the good part of the vision. And we also want to talk about what does Daniel do with the vision, all right, or not do with it. So we'll look at that next Sunday.